If we're honest with ourselves, we'll admit that most of our everyday existence is spent on intellectual autopilot. We move throughout our everyday existence guided by assumptions that we rarely, if ever, question. According to Bertrand Russell, philosophy takes us off autopilot and gets us to start questioning things that we otherwise might not have ever questioned. And in doing so, broadens our conscious horizon. In this module, we take a closer look at just how philosophy gets us to change the way we see the world. So Protagoras, maybe you guys hadn't heard of him, but you might have heard of the adage, man is the measure of all things. Have you guys heard of that? Man is the measure of all things. Pretty famous kind of saying. So Protagoras, another ancient thinker. Russell, or not another, he was an ancient thinker that said that. Russell is going to kind of be at the opposite end of the spectrum there. Right? He doesn't like that mentality that engenders, this notion that man is the measure of all things, that we sort of dictate everything, and that it kind of suggests that we are special and that we do have knowledge, okay, and that knowledge depends on us. We're the measure of all things. And Russell basically intimates that actually philosophy gets us to realize the opposite. Philosophy properly understood is going to do the opposite. It's going to wake us up to the fact that we don't know everything, that we're not the center of the universe. Right? When we're on autopilot, we go through life, right, and we think that all we're kind of aware of is our everyday life, everything that's right in front of us. Right? So it's like, I don't know, this kind of analogy's helped me. Right? So there's this big old room here, a big old universe, but if we stay focused on just our finger, right, we lose sight of it. And that's basically what's going on in our everyday lives without philosophy. We're running on autopilot. Right? We're consumed by our everyday lives. We don't have any appreciation or really awareness, much less appreciation that there is this greater mysterious universe, right? Because we're so bogged down in our everyday, the minutia of our everyday lives, living on autopilot, right? And what Russell's suggesting is that philosophy wakes us up, right? It makes us aware that there is more, right, to life, to existence than just what's right in front of us in our everyday lives. Okay? It makes us aware that we really don't know what's going on. Okay? We're not the measure of all things. We're a little speck, right, in this huge universe, and we know very, very little about it. Okay? Not to suggest we're not important. Okay? We don't want to go too far, right? But you know, it makes us kind of, it's humbling. I like the way I put it somewhere here. Right? It's humbling. It makes us aware, maybe for the first time, right, that we really don't have some of these answers. Okay, so I would argue again, Russell is pretty much at odds with this notion from Protagoras that we're the measure of all things. No, philosophy makes us aware that we're not. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns so far? Okay. So again, this is implied by everything we've been saying, but philosophy is not about establishing and dwelling on our own personal circumstances, which we already do when we're just on autopilot. Right? Outside of philosophy class, this is how we generally behave, right? We just are consumed by our everyday goings-ons. Okay? And philosophy, again, is about waking us up to the fact that there's more going on. There's a huge universe around us that's very mysterious, that we don't have the answers, all the answers for, et cetera, et cetera. Right, so it enlarges our, as I put it on the slide, enlarges our scope of consciousness, right? It makes us aware of more, you might say. And so at the bottom, it's a process by which we then begin to question maybe things that we just took for granted before. Okay? Instead of just supporting them on autopilot, we start questioning them. And that, maybe, you could argue, is what leads to maybe some of the depression, right? Because you start to realize that some of the things you took for granted all throughout your life aren't as solidified, right, or defensible as you were supposing when you were on autopilot. Okay? And then maybe that can be a kind of depressing process, realizing how little you know. Okay? Maybe that's part of what adds to, if it is indeed a depressing process, maybe that's part of the reason why. Now that we've seen how philosophy can change the way we view the world in a fundamental way, we'll turn to the final module for this lecture and offer an account of its possible benefits.